Right? A squat is not a squat, meaning that just because it has the name squat in it doesn't mean that they're all the same movement. Saying that a powerlifting squat and an Olympic lifting squat is the same thing would be kind of saying that rugby and American football is the same thing. You know, you are both hitting some people and have like a funky looking ball, but that's pretty much where it stops. With the squat, Olympic squat and powerlifting squat, you're obviously using your lower body and lower back, but that's as far as it goes. In the Olympic lifting squat, what you want to do is keep a really upright position. The best example I can give you is that the Olympic back squat is exactly the same movement as a front squat, where you're holding a perfectly upright position, otherwise the bar will fall over, but with the bar on your back. So the key point to look for is the torso angle, which would be as upright as possible, arching the upper and lower back, going down as low as possible without losing my arch, and using a narrow stance. Narrow stance, probably hip width, arching the back, arching the lower back, going down. Staying as upright as possible. If you compare that to a power squat, where the movement is more like in a arc, the Olympic squat is more in a straight line. So obviously, if you have the body leverage to do that, this movement will involve the quadriceps a bit more. There's one point I want to make about squatting also. It's another myth or another point of discussion, if you want to call it that, about putting some weights under your heels. Like some people, some coaches argue, well, you should never put weights under your heels just because you don't have the flexibility to keep your heels on the ground, because a lot of people, when they're squatting, their heels will raise off the floor like that. Now, the coaches that are against using weight plates under their heels, oftentimes they quote Olympic weightlifters as good example of, they can full squat without putting anything under their heels. I've got news for you. Look at my shoes. These are Olympic weightlifting shoes. Look at the heel. That's about an inch difference from the front. So all Olympic weightlifters squat with basically 5 pounds plate under their heels all the time. Actually, squatting with a plate under your heels, as long as your knee doesn't travel too far forward, will actually increase the involvement of the quadriceps in the movement. So it's actually a decent movement if you want to use that. There's no problem in putting a weight plate under your heels. If it's a flexibility issue, you can work on that separately and use a plate under your heels until you get the flexibility to do it. Even more than that, you could start with like a higher plate, like a 25 pound, and as you gain more flexibility, work your way down to a 10 pounds plate. Then when you get more flexible, to a 5 pound plate, which is like a little bit thinner. And eventually you'll be able to full squat without even having to use a plate. But the point is, there is really nothing wrong with using it until you work an underlying issue.